Hi, this is Diane Everett Snyder. I have been talking extensively about veterans and autistic children these last weeks, and my concerning parallels that I've seen between their symptoms such as chronic mood swings, night terrors, their hypervigilance, their repetitive motions, their anxiety levels, certainly their stress levels, many similarities between their chronic gut issues and their food fetishes. I've talked about veterans and cannabis, and a study which I created that utilized both fresh juice cannabis and one continuous 24-hour period of controlled therapy where they smoked cannabis for the entire 24 hours to achieve an emotional plateau against which it was really brutal observational therapy and a focused attention that could be given to each person's unique experiences during their deployment, and in fact reaching far back, further in their lives, as it turned out, often all the way back into their childhood. As a result of this study and the next two identical studies, I came to discover something very interesting, that when used appropriately for therapy, that cannabis is not a gateway drug, and in fact that the opposite is true. None of these veterans ever wanted to revisit the place that they had found themselves in and found within themselves, with the aid of the teams that we had constructed and the support infrastructure and the self-discovery and all of the healing that went on. It had achieved its purpose in the study, but it held absolutely no allure whatsoever for a repeat performance. I got a few emails that asked me why I was pushing so hard for cannabis, and I actually got an email that accused me of being a stoner. So I thought that this would be a good time to say for the record. Firstly, I've actually never smoked cannabis. I've had an opportunity to taste it when it's fresh juiced. Where you just take the raw plant, the bud, the leaf, the stalk, and everything, and you juice it. And I have to tell you that it has the most god-awful taste on the planet. But I did taste it, and I did notice some interesting feelings within myself, energy levels and things like that. Of course, there may have been a placebo effect, but I assure everybody that I'm not a stoner, and that I had gone to enormous trouble to select cannabis after researching not only cannabis, but multiple other options to use in the study. And the reason why I ended up selecting cannabis for this study was in part because of its inherent lack of danger to the human body, which I'll get into further into the show today. And the benefits of the fresh juice phytophenols, as well as the dynamic relationship of the cannabinoid receptor system, which is found in the human body. So, I'll just say it here. All mammals have a cannabinoid receptor pathway system, and it's very much as finely and delicately laced throughout the body as the entire nervous system. So, it was selected for all of those reasons, and as well, I selected it because previously, I had been exposed to cancer patients who had been using cannabis. My introduction to cannabis in the healing paradigm was patients that came to me already using cannabis for their recurring cancers. You see, they'd already gone through the entire medical paradigm of cutting tumors out, treating with chemotherapy, treating with radiation, being told that they were in remission, suffering terribly from the side effects of not having an immune system anymore, and all of the associated side effects of having the hair grow back in or not. Many people find that, in fact, their eyebrows do not ever grow back in, and that the hair on their head will grow back not in the same way, and the hair won't have the same texture. Men seem to not have much success with the regrowth of hair after chemotherapy. Women more so, but they have a lot of issues. So when you've been through the entire medical paradigm, and you faced it, you have faced down the monster, and the monster being both the cancer and the medical paradigm. When you have a recurrence of cancer, you are immediately much more amenable to looking at some alternatives. So I had been approached by some people who were already on cannabis, and they were just looking for emotional support and supplement support, and they wanted to know if there were any other adjuncts that they could employ along with their cannabis to help them hopefully overcome this cancer a second time. And based on what I discovered with these people, I became very open. And before, I was very closed to the idea of cannabis. I, like everybody else, had totally bought into this idea and ideology that cannabis is terrible, it's evil, it's reefer madness, and that people that smoke cannabis were lazy, homeless, good-for-nothings. I mean, all of these social things, that constructs that we are fed day in and day out. So it was very illuminating for me, and that's really where my pathway began, my road on this cannabis discovery. So now I'm going to read you something. I like to always read something. And it's some statistics. These are the causes of death, and it's data from a 2010 census, unless otherwise noted. All causes of death for 2010 were 2,468,435. Heart disease was 780,213. Malignant neoplasms or cancer, 574,743. Chronic lower respiratory disease deaths, 138,000. Cardiovascular disease, 129,500. Accidents, unintentional injuries, accidental deaths, 120,859. Motor vehicle accidents, there was a subset of the total accidents, was 35,332. Alzheimer's disease, 83,500. Diabetes, 69,000. Nephrosis and necrotic syndromes, 50,000. Influenza and pneumonia, 50,000. Drug-induced deaths, part 1, 40,393. Intentional self-harm or suicide, 38,000. Septicemia, this is a number that's going to blow your mind, 35,000. Chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, 32,000. Firearm injuries, 31,600. Essential hypertension and hypertensive renal disease, 26,634. Alcohol-induced deaths, 25,692. Parkinson's disease, 22,000. Pneumonia due to solids and liquids, 17,000. Homicide, 16,259. Human immunodeficiency virus or HIV, 8,369. Viral hepatitis, 7,564. All illicit drugs combined for the year 2000, 17,000. Drug overdose total, 38,000. Pharmaceutical drug deaths, 22,000. Pharmaceutical opioid analgesic deaths, 16,651. Deaths from cannabis, 0. Absolutely 0. And now people are going to go, yes, but I read about this story somewhere. All right. So I want to tell you about synthetic cannabinoids. These are substances that are designed to affect the body in a manner that's similar to marijuana, but it's not derived from the marijuana plant. Until 2012, they could be purchased with no age restrictions, and their popularity amongst young people had grown astronomically. Synthetic cannabinoids are known by a variety of names such as spice or K2, synthetic marijuana, fake marijuana, because they're marketed with claims that their effects mimic those of marijuana. Synthetic cannabinoids are typically sprayed onto herbal products, many of which are listed as inactive on the product packaging. Although certain synthetic cannabinoids and specific chemicals contained in these preparations were made illegal in some states, a comprehensive national ban was not enacted until July 2012. Therefore, products containing synthetic cannabinoids were frequently marketed as legal and not for human consumption and could be purchased online and in legal retail outlets such as convenience stores. Because the products marketed as synthetic cannabinoids contained different ingredients from each other, it was difficult to identify which physical effects are caused by synthetic cannabinoids. They've been reported to cause agitation, anxiety, nausea, vomiting, tachycardia, elevated blood pressure, tremors, seizures, hallucinations, paranoid behavior, and non-responsiveness. So the Drug Abuse Warning Network, which is called DAWN, first detected a measurable number of emergency departments visits involving synthetic cannabinoids in 2010. And their comprehensive report presents data related to these visits. And so, of course, I'm reading from this. Of the approximately 2,300,000 ER visits that involved drug misuse or abuse in 2010, synthetic cannabinoids were specifically linked to an estimated 11,406 visits. It's absolutely phenomenal. The report focused on this age group of 12 to 29. And in this age group, there were 8,557 visits, or 75% of all visits involving synthetic cannabinoids were made by patients aged 12 to 29 in 2010. So you have to be very careful when you read about these things in the news media because they simply list them as cannabis or marijuana-related ER visits. They do not make the distinction, which is incredibly important to make if you're going to be talking about cannabis. Because it's important, too, to know that the U.S. federal government owns the patents on the active compounds of cannabis, even though it's a Schedule I drug. So you can get cannabinoids that are synthetic, that are part of treatment protocols. And in those cases, those drugs are patented with their synthetic compounds. In drugs that have active constituents of the actual plant, it is the drug or molecule cohort that is patented, and the active cannabinoid ingredients are considered in the patenting process to be minor adjuvants, when in reality it is in fact the active constituents of the cannabis that are doing whatever the drug is being sold for as its intended purpose. So there's some very insidious things going on in this industry. And so at this point, it behoves me to talk a little bit about cannabis itself, because I've gotten some emails complaining that our shows have ended right before I was going to get into what they perceived was some nitty-gritty on cannabis itself. So I'm going to actually ask my tech guy if he can put up some links with this particular show, because there are some fantastic websites that I would recommend, but I'm not even going to try and give them to you on the show. They're just too complicated, but I will make sure that they go up with the show. And in the meantime, you can Google biochemist Dennis Hill cures stage 4 prostate cancer with cannabis oil. So you can just Google that. Biochemist Dennis Hill cured stage 4 prostate cancer. What he's done is he's put together a very comprehensive, very easy to read website that gives a lot of the very simple to read and important stuff to do with cannabis. So I'm going to just, blitz through a few things. And that is that THC kills the cancer. THC is also the molecule that has the phytotropic effects on the brain. CBD, on the other hand, kills the cancer's ability to metastasize, which is an important distinction. In fact, up until quite recently, we almost lost CBD in the hybrid strains of cannabis around the United States because they were being bred for their phytotropic capabilities. So there was a huge increase in the THC component, and the CBD was almost lost. Of course, now they're breeding it back, and you can get some cannabis that has incredibly high CBD components. So let me find this thing. I'm actually going to read something from Dennis Hill because he put it so well. And it's this. The endocannabinoid system started revealing itself to researchers in the 1940s, and by the late 60s, the basic structure and functionality had been laid out. Today, we know that the endocannabinoid system is a comprehensive system of biochemical modulators that maintain homeostasis in all body systems, including the central and peripheral nervous system, all organ systems, somatic tissues, and all metabolic biochemical systems, including the immune system. So if you understand that if you look at a body, if you could look inside the body, you could see the highway, the interconnected highway of your immune system and your cannabinoid receptor system and your nervous system. And they are all overlaid upon each other. Something that's very telling with the cannabinoid receptor system is that it goes everywhere in the body, including the brain. This is why when you take the active components of cannabis, they can treat brain cancer, because the pathway allows these molecules access to the brain across the blood-brain barrier. And our blood-brain barrier is there to keep our brain separate from our immune system, so that whatever's going on with the body is not always less likely to affect the brain. There are some criteria that when they're in place, of course, disease crosses the blood-brain barrier. And cancer can be one of those. So this homeostatic matrix is not a recent evolutionary twist just for humans. We find the endocannabinoid system in every chordate creature for the last 500 million years. It is a fully mature biochemical technology that has maintained health and metabolic balance for most of the history of life itself. Remember, as I said, that all mammals have a cannabinoid receptor system. The two major interactive systems within the endocannabinoid system are, one, the cannabinoid receptors that we find on all cell surfaces and neurological junctions, and two, the endocannabinoids that hit the receptors to trigger various metabolic processes. So if you look at cannabinoid receptor distribution maps on the body, you see that CB1 receptors, are most sensitive to anandamide, which are found in the brain, spinal nerves, and peripheral nerves. CB2 receptors are preferred by a whole nother pathway and are found largely in the immune system, primarily the spleen. The nature of the endocannabinoids are functionally much like neurotransmitters, but structurally are different. They're in the family of signaling specific lipids in the body. These signaling cannabinoids keep track of metabolic systems all over the body. This information is shared with the nervous system and the immune system so that any imbalance is attended to. If the body is in chronic disease or emotional stress, the immune system can fall behind and lose control of compromised systems. It's here that the phytocannabinoids can pitch in to support the stressed body in a return to health. The cannabis plant provides analogs of the body's primary signaling cannabinoids. THC is a mimetic, and CBD is also mimetic to other areas of the body. They have the same affinity to CB1 and CB2 receptors, providing the body with additional support for the immune and endocannabinoid systems. Phytocannabinoids supercharge the body's own endocannabinoid system by amping up the response to demand from the immune signaling system. So I would urge you to go there and read it, whether you are sick or not, and regardless of your particular feelings about cannabis, because it's very important that we get this information out there and that people understand that most of what you've been led to believe regarding cannabis is absolutely not true. THC kills the cancer by shredding the mitochondria, and there's an enormous cascade of issues that occurs along with that. So I'm going to actually start talking now about cancer, because, of course, cannabis has an enormous application in cancer, and currently we have almost 1 in 3 people with cancer. In your lifetime, you are absolutely going to know someone with cancer, and within the next 2 decades, 1 in 2 people is going to have faced cancer in their lifetime. So it is incredibly important that you educate yourself now. The laws on marijuana and medical marijuana are changing rapidly. The federal government, of course, does not recognize any of these laws. Eric Holder keeps making promises that he's not upholding. President Obama keeps making promises and, in fact, stumped with a promise to protect medical cannabis users, and all of that has fallen by the wayside. Okay, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritties concerning cancer. Cancer is anaerobic, does not need oxygen. It has developed a way to eat without oxygen, and when it can eat, it can grow. Cancer ferments glucose. Cancer cells excrete lactic acid, which goes into the liver. The liver converts the cancer cell byproducts, that lactic acid, back into glucose, and the cancer keeps eating. Cancer is very inefficient, so it's the liver that is forced to work extremely, extremely hard. Glucose is found in meat because all meat is fed corn. So when you have a diagnosis of cancer, you immediately want to cut out all corn. That's high fructose corn syrup. That is anything with corn. No meat, no chicken, and no corn products. And once you start looking at labels to eliminate corn, you realize the plethora of things that have corn in: breads, pastries, pasta, cereals, jams, ketchup, mustards, preserves. It's crazy how much stuff has corn in it, because it's cheap and available and it's genetically engineered, and you absolutely want to stay away from it. So that's the first thing and the best thing that you can do. You want to both prevent cancer or start addressing a cancer that you have, is look at this whole issue with glucose and sugars, and you want to cut out sugars. Sugars are a toxin to the body anyway, and you can go to westernaidprice.org, and you can look at some information that they have there regarding sugar. And so I want to say this because people don't know it, and it's that when you eat sugar, it lights up the same neural pathways in your brain as cocaine does. Cannabis does not light up the same neural pathway that sugar does or that cocaine does. Alcohol lights up the same pathway. Very interesting, since, of course, alcohol is completely allowed and permissive in our society. And that brings me to alcohol and cancer. When you have cancer, you do not want to use anything that has alcohol in it, even medicated drops. And the reason is because of the fermentation and methylation that occurs with alcohol in the body. Because most reproductive cancers, including breast cancer, in this case, your breast is part of your reproductive system, is fungal in nature. And so when you take a tincture that has alcohol in it, you're actually driving your cancer. So to combat that, you want to take Lugol's iodine. And if you're taking 2% Lugol's iodine, you can take 1 drop of iodine every single day, in addition to support supplements, which are selenium and a natural vitamin E. I'm a huge proponent of single supplements. I don't like combination supplements. And one of the biggest reasons why I don't like combination supplements is because their formulations are always wrong. There's always the wrong balance of supplements against each other. And they also have copper. And in the absence of iron in the body, cancer cells will migrate to copper. And we also know that copper in the body migrates to the fatty tissues of the breast. So inevitably, when you have someone who has a massive tumor in the breast, you will find that there is a lot of copper in that tumor, and you will find that there's, at its core, that it's fungal. So doctors never talk about iodine and the human body, and we are incredibly iodine deficient. So let me keep moving on. So one of the things that happens when you have cancer, and certainly as they metastasize, is people lose their appetite and they develop what's called cachexia. And then a further fallout from cachexia is what we would perceive as constipation. And doctors will then recommend a product called Ensure. Everyone's heard of Ensure. You see it at Costco. You see it at the grocery stores. But let's take a look at Ensure. The primary ingredient in Ensure is soy. One of the other major constituents of Ensure is canola oil. Canola oil, let's look at that. That is Canadian rapeseed. It's a genetically engineered organism, genetically modified organism. Rapeseed was a toxin. It had toxins in it that humans couldn't tolerate. And so it was hybridized out and renamed canola oil. So it's a genetically modified food that you absolutely never want to put in your body anyway. And soy is an estrogen mimicker. So if you have cancer, and certainly if you have breast cancer, if you have ovarian cancer, if you have uterine cancer, if you have any metastases, these metastasize to the bones, they metastasize to the colon, and they metastasize to the brain. Why on earth would a doctor recommend Ensure to give you estrogen mimickers, which are only going to drive your cancer further and faster? It's insanity. So also at Western A. Price Foundation, you can go and look at, he has several articles up about the use of soy. Excuse me. And here's where I want to talk about soy for a second. Soy was originally an agricultural feed for animals, and there was this sludgy byproduct that had to be gotten rid of, and they had to pay to get rid of it. And then a study came out that was done where they had looked at different cultures to see what it was, why it was that Western cultures had such high instances of specific cancers like breast cancer, like stomach cancer, and other cultures like the Japanese, for example, had an almost zero incidence of breast cancer and negligible incidence of stomach cancers. And what they discovered, particularly with the Japanese, was that there was one item that they ingested that Americans and Western civilizations and societies did not, and that was fermented soy. And it's important that you understand that it's fermented soy, not soy. However, the American Agricultural Association and feedlot companies latched onto this notion of soy, and very quickly the Soy Foundation became all-powerful, and soy products, soy ice cream, soy milk, soy, enveloped the market, and it's being pushed, and everyone is being told that soy is very good for you. It's a lie. It's a scam. If you want to stay healthy, and if you want your little girls to grow up healthy and not have breast cancer and other estrogen-driven cancers when they are very young, you will eliminate all soy products from your diet. All soy products, every single one of them. I suggest you, and I really urge you to go and look at Western A. Price Foundation, because they've laid it out incredibly well. And then while you're at the store, you can just take a look at a product of Ensure. Read the label on the back to see for yourself that it's the primary ingredient in this Ensure. Soy is. It's pretty scary. All right, so let's move on in this whole cancer thing. There are some doctors today that are willing to prescribe cannabis for cancer. Some doctors that have their medical licenses through the American Medical Association and other recognized medical places, and they have their medical license. However, they're often only willing to offer this medical permission slip for cannabis after the diagnosis has become terminal, after the cancer has been driven to metastasize all over the body. Patients are then told that they should go to the clinic and get a little bit of cannabis to improve their appetite so that they can eat, as though this is, the worst of their problems, the fact that they can't eat. And there's no discussion with patients or the caregivers about THC, CBD, or any of the additional enhancing side effects of cannabis. So it's at this point that I want to remind you that if you are healthy and regardless of whether you are sick, you need to do some research now, and you need to write up a living will. What happens when you're sick, and I'm going to give you a real live example. I had a client who was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and then when they went in to go and take a biopsy of the brain tumor, they found that it was just congealed blood and dead blood, which is, because it was so compacted, is why it looked like a tumor on the scans. But the point of this is that this lady had absolutely no symptoms until she woke up one morning and she had lost her speech. And within 3 days, she couldn't read anything. She couldn't speak, and she was completely at the mercy of her caregivers. So, of course, we don't wish this on anyone, but and we hope like hell it doesn't happen to us. However, it's imperative that you have a living will in place to allow your caregivers to understand what you are willing to allow and what you are not willing to allow. So that's really all I want to say, and it's incredibly powerful, and particularly if you have children, I highly recommend that you get a living will in place now, this week. I know it's Thanksgiving this week, part of giving thanks, do a living will. All right. So going back to, we've covered glucose, and we haven't really covered cachexia. Cachexia is pretty much a wasting thing, and it's because your cancer is being aggressive, and your support organs, all your processing organs, which we'll get into, are working so incredibly hard that there's really not a whole lot of energy left, and you don't have any appetite, and you've been given Ensure. That pretty much sums it up. And your family, of course, is very concerned, so they're making you meat stews and broths and all sorts of things, which is compounding your constipation, which we call it constipation, but it's not really constipation, because what has happened is the liver and gallbladder has basically shut down. It is now stuffed to the gills with toxins which are a byproduct of the cancer process, toxins which are a byproduct of any medications that you're on, and toxins that are a byproduct of those things that you are managing to put into your body. So there is no point in you taking cannabis to relieve your appetite or lack of appetite if you don't deal with the toxins that are in your liver and your gallbladder. And the most effective and safest way to deal with that is a coffee enema. So first, and I wanted to just say coffee enema, because most people rear back in absolute shock, because everyone likes their Starbucks, but no one really thinks of coffee as being useful for anything else, and it absolutely is. So a lot of people have no idea what the gallbladder function is. So I'm going to read you this quick little thing. The gallbladder is a reservoir or a storage facility for bile. Bile is a liquid that is made in the liver and travels down the common bile duct, where it's stopped by the sphincter of Oddi, a muscle sphincter at the end of the duct and the opening into the upper small intestine or duodenum. When bile encounters a closed sphincter, it travels back up the duct and veers off towards the cystic duct and into the gallbladder sac. Here in the gallbladder, 90% of the water is removed from the bile. This makes the bile more potent and efficient at performing its functions. The gallbladder, besides concentrating bile, also works with the sphincter of Oddi to start and stop the flow of bile so that it is secreted at optimal times and in optimal amounts. With the removal of the gallbladder, that control is removed and left to the sphincter alone. When we ask about gallbladder function, we are really asking about biliary function, or the purpose of bile. It's bile that performs the tasks that we need done. The gallbladder concentrates and regulates the flow of bile. Whether we have an intact gallbladder or have had it removed, we still have the same needs for bile. Whatever use you have for diet and supplements that help your gallbladder, you really need for your binary system and your biliary system. The bile needs to be kept moving before and after the gallbladder is removed, and the bile function is to break down fats and remove toxins. It breaks down the fats that you eat so that your body can utilize them. Without adequate bile, you do not metabolize your fats well, which results in a deficiency of the fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K. You may also have problems digesting the essential fatty acids, which are needed for brain development, brain function, eyes, hormones, cholesterol, and more. Amongst other systems, you could have trouble utilizing calcium. You could have a dry skin, peeling on the soles of your feet and your hands, etc. One way that you can tell that you have trouble digesting fats is if you have excessive burping that starts shortly after eating a fatty meal. You might feel nauseous or experience gas and bloating. Often the bile is thick and you can thin it out with beetroot. So if you are fresh juicing beetroot, it helps to break this all down. Secondary, bile is a very powerful antioxidant which helps to remove toxins from the liver. The liver filters toxins, bacteria, viruses, drugs, and foreign substances that the body doesn't want. We all have a chemical load that we carry because we live in the real world, and there are chemicals and toxins everywhere, in the air, in the food, in the water. We absorb them in our skin from perfumes, deodorants, soaps, from our dry cleaning that we wear, and it sends them out via the bile, which is made in the liver. The pathway of departure is from the liver through the bile ducts and into the gallbladder, or directly into the small intestine, where it joins waste matter and leaves through the colon with the feces. If you have gallbladder problems, you would do well to cleanse your liver and bowel also. So that is a little about your gallbladder. So coffee enemas. Here's in 1981, Dr. Lee Wattenberg was able to show that substances found in coffee, specifically caweol and cafestol palmate, promote the activity of a key enzyme system, glutathione transferase, above the norm. This system detoxifies a vast array of electrophiles from the bloodstream and must be regarded as an important mechanism for carcinogenic detoxification. This enzyme group is responsible for neutralizing free radicals, which are the harmful chemicals now commonly implicated in the initiation of cancer. So, for example, in mice, these systems are enhanced by 600% in the liver and 700% in the bowel when coffee beans are added to the mouse's diet. So, something very curious. Coffee enemas have a definite effect on the colon, which can be observed with an endoscope. This was discovered in 1977 by Dr. Peter Lecture. It was postulated the existence of tissue damage syndrome. When cells are challenged by poison, oxygen deprivation, malnutrition, or physical trauma, they lose potassium. They take on sodium and chloride and swell up with excess water. Because of this, increasing toxins in our foods predominantly is hugely responsible for an increase in colon cancer, because colon cancer was traditionally an old man's disease, and inevitably these old men would die of old age before they actually died of colon cancer. Increasingly, we are seeing colon cancer being diagnosed in very young men, and this is a result of the fast food that they're addicted to, eating out of cans, eating TV dinners that are prepared in the microwave. All of these things leave a chemical and toxic burden which has to be passed through the body. And as it passes through the body and sits in the colon, it does incredible physical trauma to the skin, which ultimately causes colon cancer. So let me see what else here. So here's the thing about the coffee enema. Caffeine enemas cause dilation of the bile ducts, which facilitates excretion of toxic cancer breakdown products by the liver and dialysis of toxic products across the colonic walls. In addition, the two other chemicals in coffee dilate blood vessels and counter the inflammation of the gut, which is a huge issue in cancer specifically. The palmitates enhance the enzyme system responsible for the removal of toxic free radicals from the serum, and the fluid of the enema then stimulates the visceral nervous system to promote peristalsis and the transit of diluted toxic bile from the duodenum and out of the rectum. Since the enema is generally held for about 15 minutes and all the blood in the body passes through the liver every 3 minutes, these coffee enemas represent a form of dialysis of blood across the gut wall. And this was discovered in 1986. All the science has been done. It's all there and it's researchable. So in order for you to do this research, you can go to a gallbladder website. They have this kind of stuff up there. Or you can go to www.budwick-videos. And the reason I want you to go to the videos is because they have some very interesting videos there on the types of foods that you should be eating when you have cancer. because the body is working so hard to process all the byproducts of the cancer, and the liver and the gallbladder is in a state of toxicosis, you don't want to try and force a cancer patient to eat normal foods, but you do want to give them bioavailable nutrients. So you want to do juicing. And juicing basically eliminates all of the pulp. It breaks down the cell walls, extracts the bioavailable and phytonutrients, and delivers them in a drink to the patient without the body having to break anything down, separate the fiber, and pass the fiber through the body. So even though this fiber is important for colon health and scrubbing the colon and all of these things, in order to overcome cachexia and this what we call constipation, which you now understand is not truly constipation, you want to give them the resources, give the body the resources to start cleansing the system in order to facilitate a strengthened immune and allow them to start healing themselves. Because if you do all of these things, the immune can actually take over. So the superstars of juicing would be the cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, spinach, collards, even tomatoes, kale, cabbage, carrots, and peas. Extract of pea is a phenomenal cancer-fighting product, and there is a protein in that. So instead of using this horrible estrogen-mimicking Ensure, you can go to the health food store and you can buy extract of peas and extract of rice, because you have rice protein. It's a hypoallergic protein, and you have pea protein. And you can start mixing some very small shakes, but you're really not going to push that. You're going to push juicing. And your ratio of juicing is going to be 5 vegetables for every 1 fruit. Apples are incredible because they have apple pectin in them. And you always want to use the seeds of the apple and the seeds of the pear, because you have B17 or latril, organic arsenic, which is a very strong anti-cancer fighting component. In addition, you want to make sure that you're giving someone with cancer milk thistle capsules, dandelion capsules. You also want to make sure that you're giving them magnesium to support the cardioelectric output. You want to give them coconut oil because it's rich in omegas. It's a total superfood. And also hemp oils. You want to give them vitamin C. You want to give them ginger. And you want to give them beetroot. All right, so let's continue. It's interesting. When the World Health Organization came out and said that inflammation is the precursor to all the diseases currently endemic across first, second, and third world nations, it was a very telling moment in time, because all vaccine science is based upon Pasteur's germ theory. Pasteur's germ theory postulates that the human body is perfect and that all disease comes from outside of the human body. But what we know about inflammation and the way that it wreaks havoc on the body is the way in which inflammation wears down on the immune system, how it causes adrenal fatigue and a general wearing down of the body's ability to take care of itself. So you cannot have Pasteur's germ theory dictating our modern medicine paradigm and then simultaneously acknowledge that inflammation is the precursor to so much disease in the world. You simply can't have it both ways. And it's important to know that vaccine science is highly regarded across the world by all the scientists, all the doctors, and yet doctors themselves do not adhere to a vaccine schedule for themselves or their own children. So, think about that in much the same way that oncologists and doctors that work with cancer patients and chemotherapy drugs, a study that was done, a questionnaire that was sent out that asked them for their particular cancer protocols, were they ever to have cancer? Overwhelmingly, almost 80% of the doctors polled said that under no circumstances would they follow the cancer treatment protocols as listed by the American Medical Association and endorsed by the FDA. So I'm going to move on. I know I'm kind of jumping around with cancer and food and vaccines and all this kind of stuff, but these things are all incredibly related, and you cannot look at any of them in isolation. So for those of you to whom some of this is gobbledygook, I urge you to go back and look at my show from the 26th of November, because there I give a whole lot more about cancer and the treatments, including cannabis, and there's a lot of links that have been put up with that particular YouTube video. And I will work on getting more links put up with this particular video so that you can cross-reference them and understand all the different ways in which they're connected. There is no health at the end of a needle. There is incredible health at the end of your fork. So you have to be cognizant. Interestingly too, World Health Organization has come out and said that while malnutrition has been an issue in the past, today it's the quality of food and the lack of nutrient and bioavailability in foods that is causing havoc, particularly in third world countries. If you understand that global prosperity is being undermined by the silent crisis of undernutrition, which prevents people and countries reaching their full potential, you understand where this is going. Undernutrition is the largest single contributor to child mortality worldwide, underlying 1/3 of deaths amongst children under 5. It is also responsible for the loss of billions of dollars in productivity, in effect stunting not only citizens, but also the competitiveness and the economic growth of the countries most affected. Of course, this is in the profile of the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, or CIFF. And if you look at those numbers, it's quite scary. 7 million children under the age of 5 die each year, and the vast majority die from easily preventable deaths. It's mostly diarrhea, pneumonia, malaria, as well as infections and hypothermia in early infancy. These are all part of the lack of nutrition. And as I've also said before, we can easily identify with malnutrition in third world countries because those are the people that look very skeletal and very thin and clearly in need of a good plate of food. But conversely, in first world countries, there is another form of malnutrition, and that's the grossly, obesely overweight syndrome. All these incredibly fat people that we see, that we encounter everywhere, and they're not only the Walmart shoppers. I see them increasingly everywhere. They represent US on the world stage. They are huge. They are ginormous. This is a form of malnutrition. This is because everyone is eating food, P-H-U-D-E, and not food, F-O-O-D. The FDA has also said that wheat is the only food crop of the primary food crops that is not genetically engineered. And they lie, ladies and gentlemen, they lie through their teeth. And let me tell you why. And it's a sticky little loophole through which they're able to say this and get away with it. Because today, all the genetically modified foods, and that's, corn, sugar beets, alfalfa, eggplants, soy, all of these things that are genetically modified and genetically engineered today are all done using a very similar technique. However, in the 1950s, the first thing that they experimented on was wheat. And the wheat that we have today is in no way, shape, or form the wheat that your grandparents were eating when they were children. And it has to do with this word called polymorphism. So I want you to Google that. It's Polymorphism, polymorphism. Gluten was one of the earliest protein fractions observed, and this was done in 1728. There was a translation done by 1941 by a man by the name of Bailey. All of this can be read about in the Journal of Experimental Botany. In particular, volume 60, issue 6, page 1537 to 1553. There's an enormous section that deals with wheat structure and the discussion with an enormous amount of links, and I'll be sure and put the link up to that. What is scary about what they discuss is how they know the way in which their current wheat does not take up selenium and other insoluble and soluble molecules from the soil. Today, people are incredibly chromium deficient. Chromium alone can reverse type 2 diabetes if you're paying attention to your diet and using spices for their ORAC value. And so Google ORAC, O-R-A-C, all capitals, so that you know what I'm talking about. So chromium and selenium. We understand that goats, if they do not get enough selenium, this is why goats eat sand, they are looking for trace amounts of selenium. If a pregnant goat does not get adequate amounts of selenium while she's carrying her child, that child will be born deformed, will fail to thrive, will not be able to suckle, and will die generally within the first 3 days. All of our current population is selenium deficient. All of our current population groups across all specters are magnesium deficient. We did some tests on the veterans in my study, and they were so extremely magnesium deficient that one of the doctors was concerned as to how one of the particular veterans even had a heartbeat. His magnesium levels were so low. Anyway, back to wheat. In 1960, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released a short film, and the title of that is Miracles from Agriculture. And this particular little documentary, it's only about 42 minutes long, sheds light on exactly how wheat and gluten became a health monster. So when you hear things about how wheat is not GMO, you will understand that they lie. And there are gluten books that are available on the internet that talk about the ways in which gluten has been bastardized and changed. There's also a 2009 study called The Increased Prevalence and Mortality in Undiagnosed Celiac Disease. It was published in the Journal of Gastroenterology, and the researchers concluded that the prevalence of undiagnosed celiac disease, which is a potentially deadly condition caused by an autoimmune reaction to the protein gluten, seems to have increased dramatically in the last 20 years. In the 1950s, there was 1 in approximately 5,000 people that had a gluten sensitivity, let alone a life-threatening reaction. In 2010, it's 1 in 133. So there is a website that you can go to. It's called the word one, O-N-E, in 133, and the numerology numbers, .org. That's upwards of 3 million Americans suffer from celiac disease and another 18 million Americans from non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Of course, I estimate that there's probably another 40 million Americans, particularly children, particularly in the autism and behavioral discordant community, that are gluten insensitive and have gluten intolerances that have not been diagnosed. And this goes into this whole thing about ADD and ADHD and all these kids that are on the autism spectrum, where we now know that more than 7 million children are currently diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And more than 3 million of these kids, children 16 and under, are on Ritalin. This is more than 5 times the rest of the world combined. More than 5 times. Yes, obviously I'm speechless, so I'm just going to continue. So there's plenty of studies that talk about Ritalin, Focalin, Concerta, and Metadane that causes damage to the nucleus accumbens, which is an area of the brain crucial to motivation and drive. While the nucleus is not involved in cognitive functions like learning and memory, but by changing it so early in a child's life, some of these kids that are being put on these drugs are as young as 2 years old. There are plenty of case reports of kids that are 3 and 5 years old that have already been on these drugs for a year and more. It's positively frightening. And these are the children that are being consistently medicated into their teens and young adulthood. Schizophrenia, there's 1% of the population who has schizophrenia. But we are now diagnosing, supposedly, I put diagnosing in parentheses, so many more people, so many young adults and young teenagers with the behavioral symptoms of schizophrenia. And in truth, this is not schizophrenia. This is brain damage as a result of all of these chemicals that they've been on through all of their formative years. The brain has been malnourished. You need to get these kids onto coconut oils and fish oils and ignore all the nonsense mainstream media reports that say fish oils are bad for you. They are not. They are very good for you. Coconut oil is amazing. So is hemp oil. It has a full range of omegas. The brain is a fatty tissue. It requires omegas. Get your kids onto selenium. Give them magnesium. Give them full spectrum whole herb formulations. And start planting cilantro, basil, and all of these basic things and feeding it to them and the rest of your family to see a vast increase in your day-to-day health and your quality of life. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.
Parker family has 2 houses on a property that shares a private well. They say they've been having issues with their water for about a year now.
Especially in the mornings, you come in and turn the water on, and there's so much air pressure in the lines that it just blows water everywhere. You're soaked.
Sarah Evans came up with the idea to put a lighter to the water at her parents' house.
Because I'd seen it on TV before. Flame came up.
That's when she walked over to her brother's house. That's connected to the same well and did the same thing.
His blew up and caught curtains. The fringe of the curtains up here is how high the flames went up.
They suspect they have methane leaking into their private well water. And because an oil and gas company drilling is so close to their homes, John Parker has his suspicions about where it's coming from.
This only started since they drilled these wells.
That company, Anadarko Petroleum Corporation, tells KSLA News 12 they will be doing some testing to see whether there is a leak. In the meantime, they delivered several cases of water to the families.
It makes you wonder what's going to happen next, you know.
For more news, visit youtube.com/pigmine5.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.